In my last video, I had a bunch of pens that I had received in pen mail, and amongst them was this right here, a Waterman Sky Writer. Depending upon the source that you look for information, Sky Writers came out in the 1950s or the 1940s. Like I said, it depends on where you look. One of the websites and people I trust at Pen Hero said 1950s. The difference, though, is all the examples that he has there don't have the same kind of body that I've got here. It's a beautiful looking celluloid style body, so I'm thinking 1940s rather than something out of the 1950s. And all the examples that he had on his website and pictures seem to be like in a plastic, in a resin, rather than what I'm seeing here. So my thought is some of the other web hosting research that I had done that said 1940s, mid to late 40s might be accurate for the first wave. So I am going to share with you this right here. I'm going to read to you some of what that was written here, that the tale of three skywriters. Collectors who've run across a pen marked Skywriter may do a double take, as there are actually three different pens from different eras, all from Waterman, and each is representative of changes in the direction of the company. The first pen was an all-plastic pen made by Waterman for the Aiken-Lambert Pen Company, significant in that it's the last pen made under the Aiken-Lambert name before the company was fully absorbed into the parent Waterman Company. Waterman purchased Aiken-Lambert in the late 1930s. Airplanes were the pinnacle of engineering in the late 1930s and 1940s, and pen manufacturers wanted to capitalize on this with the examples of the Schaefer Skyboy and Eversharp Skyline. The problem with that statement about the Eversharp Skyline is my understanding is it was actually named after the engine of a train at the time. So a pen called Skywriter could easily fit in. The first generation was the Aiken-Lambert Skywriter, as shown in a 1937 sales brochure featuring a flying plane on the first page. The first Skywriter pens were made in the US and Canada and can be identified by the imprint on the barrel with either Skywriter, manufactured in Canada by Alco Division, L.E. Waterman Company, which is exactly what this one right here has to say, or the Skywriter Aiken-Lambert, made in USA by L.E. Waterman Company. They sold for about $1.50. Lever filler pens have an elegant Art Deco clip, gold or silver color trim, and one of two cap bands. They featured an ink gauge, which this one does not. Transparent section window seen in many late 1930s pens that allowed the user to see how much ink was left. These Skywriters were priced at about $1.50. Were offered in men's and ladies sizes, a variety of Pyrrolin colors including swirled marble, which you do see here, a swirled marble, and stripes. Stripe colors are shown in a 1937 brochure, included brown pearl, green pearl, and gray pearl, and jet black. Let me show you a few before pictures of what this pen looked like when I first got it. You can also look at the previous video that I did, and you'll see that I can't really say it's a plastic body because maybe it is a plastic. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily feel like a plastic. But it does kind of remind me of some acrylic with an amount of swirl, but it also reminds me of a little bit of celluloid that I've seen previously. But this lever here, see how kind of shiny that is right now? That cleaned up fairly nicely. I got just a tiny little speck of stuff here at the very end of tarnish that I wasn't able to get off that. And you'll see the rings here on the cap have come clean. The clip was the worst part of all, and I got most of that clip cleaned up, and you can see right here at the very top of that clip, no matter what I did, I couldn't get some of that tarnish off from that metal. I got most of it off, so it came to somewhat of a shine, but I spent a lot of time trying to polish that, clean it up, and get it to look nice. But the body and of the barrel And the cap, to me, actually turned out, I think, pretty darn well. Nice and shiny. So you unscrew it, and you've got a nib that also is a Canadian nib. I'm going to see if I can get focus in on it right here, but if not, I've got a close-up picture of it. That nib actually seemed a little shorter than most of the Waterman nibs that I've had previously. I've got this to come out finally. It took a little bit of finagling to get the section out of the barrel, but when I got it out, it went all right. It took an awful long time to knock out this section, to take that section and knock out that nib and that feed, because one of the things that Waterman does is they tend to use a very long feed, and it goes about the entire length of that section, usually all the way up to the back where you put on the sack. So cleaned it up nice, put on a sack. This turned out to be a number 17 sack. Fortunately, I had just gotten a restocking of a bunch of sacks, so I had a bunch of number 17 sacks for this. That feed cleaned up very nicely. It was kind of grungy before, but I got that to shine up pretty nice. And there we go. So let's go ahead and put pen to paper, because I got to be honest with you, I was actually very pleasantly surprised with how this one wrote. So it can post very nicely. It's not an overly heavy pen. So I'm going to call this pen probably from the 1940s or so. Although, Aiken Lambert, when they were making them in the 30s, well, you figure in the 40s, I'm pretty sure that this is a 1940s model. So let's go 1940s Waterman Sky Writer. I gotta be honest, this nib surprised me. When I first put it to paper, I just wrote on the back of an envelope of some mail that I hadn't opened yet that was laying here on my desk. I got this pen just yesterday in the mail. And I don't know if you recall, but I showed you where it came in this box. It had all kinds of black dust in it. And when I took it out and I just laid the pen on my desk, it got black dust all over my desk. And that was from the ink sac that was crumbling. And it took a little while to be able to dig all that ink sac out of here. So I was able to get all the sac out of it. I was able to clean out that barrel. I was able to clean out that cap. I was able to knock out that nib, knock out that feed, clean up the section, and all of that in my ultrasonic cleaner. Ran it through a couple of cycles, and then I sat down and commenced cleaning and polishing. And I have not had to do any tuning to this nib after getting it all back together. So I put in here a old reliable, a Waterman Intense Black. And I like to put in Waterman inks, not just because it's a Waterman pen, but it's a good safe ink. It's a go-to ink of mine. I tend to use it an awful lot, and this is a good wet writer. The first time I wrote with it, I said that is smooth, which it is, and it is wet. Very good wet writer, and even not when it's not on a Rhodia pad, it actually was a very wet writer. One of the first things I noticed about it. So something else about it, it writes first time every time I go to pick it up and go to use it. But watch this. This has a little bit of flex to it. I didn't expect to have any kind of flex in this nib, but I do actually have a fairly decent amount of flex in it. And it's not one of those wet noodle flexes, and I'm not a real big fan of those. But if you wanted to play with it and you wanted to get some line variation, you can definitely do so. When you listen to it, it's got just a little bit of feedback. This is one of those where the feedback sounds worse than the pen actually writes. So I'm pretty happy with it. And I got to admit, it's one heck of a writer. And I'm really happy. So for about 20 bucks, I took the chance, even as grungy as it looked in the listing that I found on eBay from the person who was selling it. I knew it was going to have restoration. I knew that going into it. I didn't know how ossified that sack was going to be, how much crunch was going to be in it, but a couple of things. Number one, I follow my own technique that I outlined for you on how to change an ink sac on this very channel. So if you watch that video, what you saw in the video is exactly what I did in order to change the ink sac on this. And then there was another video where somebody asked me how I clean up a pen. And I haven't videoed me doing it, but I did have a video where I talked through what exactly I do. And I used those very steps that were in that video to get the results that you see right here, to the point where I've literally had a couple of people ask me to work on theirs. Alright, well there you go. There's the latest pen that I have that has been restored and to about as good as it's going to get, at least with my skill set. And I've got more that are going to be on the way. I've also got a few those other pens that were in my pen mail in my last video that I have not inked up yet, but will for you and eventually, and maybe we'll get a chance to see those too. So, all right, thanks for watching. Bye.